November 16th, 2022 started like any other autumn day in Atlanta, Georgia. The crisp air carried the scent of fallen leaves, and families across the city were settling into their evening routines. Children were finishing homework, mothers were preparing dinner, and the sounds of suburban life filled the neighborhoods. But for one family, this ordinary Thursday would become their darkest nightmare. In a quiet residential area, for children would witness something no child should ever see. Their mother, Cornishia Butler, had made a decision that would cost her everything. She had chosen to give love another chance, to believe that people could change, that the woman who had terrorized her for months might somehow be different this time. But some people don't change. Some people become more dangerous when they feel they're losing control. And sometimes, the person you once shared your bed with, your dreams with, your life with, becomes the very person who destroys it all. What unfolded that evening would shock even seasoned investigators. A love story that had begun with promise and hope would end in violence so brutal, so calculated, that it would leave an entire community questioning how someone could harbor such hatred for a person they once claimed to love. Before we continue with this heartbreaking story, I want you to think about something. Have you ever wondered how someone you once loved could become your worst nightmare? How the person who used to hold you close could become the one who wants to hurt you the most? If this story resonates with you, or if you know someone who might need to hear it, please hit that like button and share this video. Your engagement helps us reach more people who might benefit from understanding the warning signs we're about to discuss. And make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, because stories like Cornishia's need to be told. Cornishia Butler was the kind of mother every child deserves. At 34 years old, she had dedicated her life to raising her 4 children in Atlanta, working tirelessly to provide them with stability and love. Her days began before sunrise and ended long after her youngest had fallen asleep, but she never complained. Being a single mother wasn't easy, but Cornishia had found her rhythm. She worked hard to maintain their home, ensuring her children had everything they needed. Her Mercedez Benz wasn't just a car to her. It was a symbol of her independence, her ability to provide for her family on her own terms. Friends described her as resilient, determined, and fiercely protective of her children. She was the type of woman who would go without so her kids could have more. But Cornishia carried a burden that many single mothers know all too well, the loneliness that comes with shouldering everything alone. She had ended a 6-year relationship months earlier, a relationship that had become increasingly troubled. The breakup hadn't been easy, but she had thought the worst was behind her. What Cornishia didn't fully understand was that for some people, rejection isn't just painful, it's unforgivable. She had tried to move forward, to focus on her children, and rebuild her life. She had even taken legal steps to protect herself, obtaining a restraining order after her ex-partner's behavior became threatening. Yet here she was, on this November evening, having made the decision to give their relationship another try. Perhaps she believed in second chances. Perhaps she thought love could conquer the darkness that had crept into their relationship. Perhaps she simply wanted her children to have a complete family again. Whatever her reasons, Cornishia Butler was about to discover that some decisions can't be undone. 6 years earlier, Cornishia Butler and Shakia Perkins had met under completely different circumstances. Like many couples, their story began with attraction, shared laughter, and the promise of building something beautiful together. Perkins was charming, attentive, and seemed genuinely interested in becoming part of Cornishia's world, which included her children. In the early days, Perkins appeared to embrace the role of a step-parent. She would spend time with the kids, help with daily routines, and present herself as someone who wanted to create a stable family unit. Cornishia, who had been managing everything alone, found comfort in having a partner who seemed willing to share the responsibilities of raising 4 children. Their relationship moved quickly, as many intense relationships do. Perkins moved in, and for a while, it seemed like Cornishia had found the missing piece to complete her family puzzle. The children had someone else to rely on, and Cornishia had emotional and practical support in managing her household. Friends and family members who knew them during this period described them as a couple who seemed committed to making their blended family work. There were vacations, family dinners, and all the ordinary moments that make up a shared life. But beneath the surface, cracks were already beginning to form. As their relationship progressed, the initial charm that had drawn Cornishia to Perkins began to reveal a darker side. What had once seemed like passionate devotion slowly transformed into possessive behavior. Perkins became increasingly controlling, questioning Cornishia's whereabouts, monitoring her interactions with friends and family, and demanding constant attention and reassurance. The arguments started small but grew more frequent and intense. Perkins would accuse Cornishia of being unfaithful without any evidence, creating drama over innocent interactions with coworkers or neighbors. These confrontations often happened in front of the children, exposing them to a toxic environment that no child should witness. Cornishia found herself walking on eggshells, constantly trying to avoid triggering Perkins' jealousy and anger. She began isolating herself from friends and family members, partly to keep peace at home, and partly because she was embarrassed by the increasingly volatile nature of their relationship. The woman who had once been confident and independent was slowly losing herself. Despite the growing problems, Cornishia kept trying to make the relationship work. She believed that if she could just be more understanding, more patient, more accommodating, things would improve. She made excuses for Perkins' behavior, telling herself that the stress of blending their families was temporary and that love would eventually overcome their challenges. But domestic violence rarely improves on its own. Instead, it typically escalates, and Perkins' behavior was following this predictable pattern. The emotional abuse was laying the groundwork for what would eventually become physical violence, though Cornishia didn't yet recognize the dangerous path they were on. By 2021, Cornishia had reached her limit. The constant fighting, the accusations, and the toxic atmosphere in their home had become unbearable. Her children were being affected by the tension, and she realized that staying in this relationship was doing more harm than good to everyone involved. The decision to end their 6-year relationship wasn't made lightly. Cornishia had invested years of her life trying to make things work, but she finally understood that some relationships are beyond repair. She told Perkins that their romantic relationship was over and that it was time for them to separate permanently.
The City of South Fulton Police Chief says his officers did their job, bringing 4 domestic violence type cases against one woman last year who got bond. And now the department has arrested her for murder. Same victim. Should Cornishia Butler still be alive today?
You know, I would think so.
But for a bail bond and perhaps a fatally flawed personal decision, murder victim Cornishia Butler might still be alive, says City of South Fulton Police Chief Keith Meadows.
We've been in this business long enough to know that violent behavior is progressive.
A City of South Fulton police lieutenant says Shakia Perkins has been charged with the murder of Cornishia Perkins November 16th and more. He confirms the victim was also known as Cornishia Butler, a mother of 4, the suspect's wife, that the couple had been estranged but reunited. But records indicate that's not the first time Shakia Perkins has been charged with crimes victimizing Ms. Butler. That in October of 2021, a judge ordered bond totaling $70,000 for Shakia Perkins on charges of aggravated assault, criminal damage to property, terroristic threats, felony, and arson first degree. Conditions including must not come within 200 yards of victim.
We would not want to see an individual get out on such a low bond given the history between these two individuals.
September 13th, 2021, a City of South Fulton police report contains allegations suggesting Shakia Perkins used her car to hit Ms. Butler's, attempting to push her off the road, then struck Ms. Butler's car again. The report indicates they were separated at the time. September 15th, 2021, a City of South Fulton incident report says Ms. Butler advised that Ms. Perkins advised she would come to her house to see if she had company. Ms. Butler advised that Ms. Perkins arrived and kicked in her door, cracking the frame. A South Fulton police lieutenant says September 25th, 2021, Shakia Perkins allegedly set a fire that engulfed 2 of Ms. Butler's vehicles and damaged her house as well. South Fulton Police Chief Keith Meadows says Ms. Butler showed police screenshots in which Shakia Perkins allegedly texted, quote, "Soon you will be dead, and I'll be in jail, and that's fine," unquote. And, quote, "I'm going for first degree, not second degree. Stamp that."
You feel like you as police did your job, but the court system let you down?
We do. We see one case after another where, the victim actually reached out to us and we responded appropriately.
A statement attributed to Fulton County District Attorney Fonnie Willis says, "My office opposed bond in this case. Cases involving domestic violence often involve ongoing danger to the victim. We urge judges hearing bond requests in domestic violence cases to carefully consider the potential danger to victims and either hold defendants in jail without bond or, at a minimum, impose monitoring requirements on them that will ensure they cannot approach their victims without law enforcement being notified."
When you see time and time again, people are let out on these sort of crimes and they ultimately result in murder, there's a breakdown somewhere.
A public defender spokesperson emailed the Office of the Fulton County Public Defender represents Ms. Perkins in the 2021 and November 2022 cases. Defender attorneys are thoroughly investigating the circumstances surrounding the allegations, providing Ms. Perkins zealous, effective, and timely representation. The serious nature of the charges precludes further comment at this point in time.
For most people, a breakup, even a difficult one, eventually leads to acceptance and moving forward. But Perkins didn't respond like most people. Instead of respecting Cornishia's decision, she became enraged. The rejection triggered something dangerous in her, and she refused to accept that their relationship was truly over. What should have been the end of their story together was actually just the beginning of a much darker chapter. Perkins began making it clear that if she couldn't have Cornishia, then no one could. The separation that was supposed to bring peace to Cornishia's life instead marked the start of a campaign of terror that would ultimately cost her everything. September 13th, 2021 marked the first time Perkins' threats turned into actual physical violence. What happened that day would set the tone for everything that followed, showing just how far she was willing to go to terrorize her former partner. Cornishia was driving when she noticed Perkins following her in her own vehicle. What started as stalking quickly escalated into something far more dangerous. Perkins began using her car as a weapon, deliberately ramming into Butler's vehicle while they were both on the road. The impact could have caused a serious accident, potentially injuring or killing not just Cornishia, but innocent bystanders as well. But Perkins wasn't finished. After the initial collision, she attempted to push Butler's car off the road entirely. When that failed, she struck Butler's vehicle again, this time with even more force. The attack was calculated and deliberate. This wasn't road rage or a moment of poor judgment. This was attempted murder using a 2,000-pound weapon. Cornishia managed to escape the attack and immediately contacted the police. She filed a detailed report describing exactly what had happened, providing law enforcement with their first official documentation of Perkins' violent behavior. This report would become crucial evidence, but unfortunately, it was just the beginning of a pattern that would only get worse. Just 2 days after the vehicular attack, Perkins escalated her campaign of terror by targeting Cornishia's home, the one place where she and her children should have felt completely safe. On September 15th, 2021, Perkins made it clear that no location was off limits in her quest to control and intimidate her former partner. According to the police report filed by Butler, Perkins had threatened to come to her house to check if she had company. This wasn't a casual visit from an ex-partner. It was a calculated threat designed to let Cornishia know that she was being watched and that her privacy meant nothing to Perkins. When Perkins arrived at the house, she didn't simply knock on the door or ring the doorbell. Instead, she kicked in the front door with such force that it cracked the door frame. This violent entry into Cornishia's home was both a physical assault on her property and a psychological assault on her sense of security. Her children's safe space had been violated, and the message was clear. Nowhere was safe from Perkins' rage. 10 days after the home invasion, Perkins committed what would become one of the most destructive acts in her escalating campaign of violence. On September 25th, 2021, she crossed a line that demonstrated just how dangerous she had become and how far she was willing to go to destroy Cornishia's life. In the middle of the night, Perkins arrived at Butler's property with gasoline and matches. She deliberately set fire to not just one, but 2 of Cornishia's vehicles, including the Mercedez Benz that represented so much more than just transportation. That car was a symbol of Cornishia's independence, her hard work, and her ability to provide for her children as a single mother. The flames that consumed the vehicles didn't stop there. The fire spread to Cornishia's house, causing significant damage to the structure where she and her 4 children lived. What had started as an attack on property quickly became a threat to human life. If the fire had spread further, or if the family had been trapped inside, this act of arson could have easily become a mass murder. The destruction was devastating both financially and emotionally. Cornishia lost her primary means of transportation, faced expensive repairs to her home, and had to explain to her children why someone who had once lived with them would want to hurt their family so badly. The psychological impact of watching your life literally go up in flames cannot be overstated. This wasn't just vandalism or property damage. This was domestic terrorism, plain and simple. I want you to pause for a moment and really think about what Cornishia was going through. What would you do if someone you once trusted began systematically destroying your life? If your car was burned, your home damaged, and your children's safety threatened by someone who claimed to love you? This is the reality that thousands of domestic violence victims face every day. If this story is opening your eyes to the severity of domestic abuse, please hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs to see it. Your engagement could literally save a life by helping someone recognize these warning signs before it's too late. After enduring months of escalating violence, Cornishia Butler did everything the system told her to do. She documented every incident, filed police reports, and sought legal protection through the courts. Following the arson attack in September, she knew that Perkins posed a serious threat, not just to her, but to her 4 children as well. Butler obtained a restraining order against Perkins, a legal document that was supposed to keep her former partner at least 200 yards away from her at all times. On paper, this order should have provided the protection she desperately needed. The court recognized the danger Perkins represented and legally prohibited her from coming anywhere near Butler or her children. Along with the restraining order, Butler continued to work closely with law enforcement. She provided detailed statements about each incident, turned over evidence, including photographs of the damage to her property, and maintained careful records of every threatening contact from Perkins. She was building a comprehensive case that clearly demonstrated a pattern of escalating domestic violence. Butler believed she was doing everything right. She had followed all the proper legal channels, cooperated fully with police, and taken every step recommended by domestic violence advocates. Unfortunately, she was about to learn that legal documents are only as effective as the system's ability to enforce them. Despite the restraining order that legally prohibited contact, Perkins continued to terrorize Butler through text messages that revealed the true depth of her murderous intentions. These weren't empty threats made in the heat of anger. They were calculated promises of violence that would prove to be tragically prophetic. In one particularly disturbing message, Perkins wrote, "Soon you will be dead, and I'll be in jail, and that's fine." This text message demonstrated that she had already accepted the consequences of murder and was willing to spend her life in prison if it meant ending Cornishia's life. The casual tone of the message made it even more terrifying. In those final moments, Cornishia Butler's worst fears were realized. The woman she had tried to love, tried to help, tried to give another chance to, became her killer. The decision to reconcile, made with hope and perhaps desperation, had led to the ultimate betrayal. The immediate aftermath of Cornishia Butler's murder was chaos and devastation. For traumatized children had just witnessed their mother's death at the hands of someone they knew, someone who had lived in their home and been part of their daily lives. The psychological shock of what they had seen would require years of therapy and support to process. Emergency responders arrived at the scene to find a crime that would haunt even experienced first responders. The South Fulton Police Department, who had been working Butler's case for over a year, now faced the grim reality that their worst fears had come true. Despite their efforts to build cases against Perkins, despite the restraining orders and legal protections, they had been unable to prevent this tragedy. Perkins was arrested at the scene and taken into custody. There was no attempt to flee, no effort to hide what she had done. She had carried out her threat exactly as she had promised in those text messages months earlier. Her prediction that she would go to jail for first-degree murder was about to become reality. The children were immediately placed in protective custody, while family members were contacted. Their lives had been shattered in an instant, and they would now face the challenge of growing up without their mother. Following her arrest, Shakia Perkins was formally charged with first-degree murder, exactly as she had promised in her threatening text messages to Butler months earlier. The premeditated nature of the crime was evident in the charges, reflecting the prosecution's belief that this was a calculated killing rather than a spontaneous act of violence. In addition to the murder charge, Perkins faced charges for possession of a firearm or weapon, demonstrating that she had armed herself before carrying out the attack. Perhaps most significantly, she was also charged with cruelty to children, acknowledging the horrific trauma she had inflicted on Butler's 4 children by forcing them to witness their mother's murder. These new charges were added to Perkins' already extensive criminal record, which included the 2021 arson case, where she had burned Butler's Mercedez Benz and damaged her home. The pattern of escalating violence was now complete, culminating in the ultimate act of domestic terrorism. Her criminal history painted a clear picture of someone who had been building toward this moment for over a year. Police Chief Keith Meadows of the South Fulton Police Department was candid in his assessment of the case, acknowledging that while his officers had done their job properly, the system had ultimately failed Cornishia Butler. When asked directly if Butler should still be alive, Chief Meadows responded, "I would think so," highlighting the preventable nature of this tragedy. Chief Meadows emphasized that his department had brought 4 separate domestic violence cases against Perkins, building a comprehensive record of her violent behavior. He noted that violent behavior is progressive, and warning signs had been clearly documented. The police had responded appropriately to every call and had built solid cases against the perpetrator. District Attorney Fonnie Willis released a statement confirming that her office had opposed bond for Perkins, recognizing the ongoing danger she posed to Butler. Willis urged judges to carefully consider the potential danger to victims in domestic violence cases and to either hold defendants without bond or impose strict monitoring requirements to ensure victim safety. This tragic story raises critical questions about how our justice system handles domestic violence cases. How can we better protect victims like Cornishia Butler when all the legal safeguards fail? If this story has opened your eyes to the realities of domestic violence, please hit that like button and share this video with others who need to see it. Leave a comment below, sharing your thoughts on how we can improve protection for domestic violence victims. And make sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on, because these important stories need to be told and heard. Your engagement helps us reach more people who might recognize these warning signs in their own lives.